Hello everyone, welcome back to Grim Dawn. I apologize for having been away for a little bit. As you can hear, I'm a little under the weather. I have been since Thursday, I think it was. Um, but I'm well enough now to actually be... I need to turn this light off. I'm well enough now to actually record, because I can at least be understood. Pardon me. So we're going to keep on going through the Warden's Cellar. Now, this area is a lot larger than really what you need to be dealing with. A lot of the areas up till now that you've been through, they're not massively expansive, really. You go through a majority of them normally trying to complete the quests. This will be the first area that you can really outright ignore a large amount of. And it's also going to be the first area where you might have to go through some parts of it simply because of areas that have been randomly blocked off. Now, if you're new, you've probably noticed by now that some areas are blocked off. You know, some paths are blocked off, some are not. And if you go to an area you've already been to before, you'll notice that these change. Well, this is the area where that actually matters substantially because it really can drastically alter how long you spend in an area. For example, this area was blocked off here, so I looped around down here. Actually, let me bring up the map for this. Where's my map on? There we go. This way was blocked off, which is where you ideally would want to go, so I had to go all the way around here, and I had to fight some extra enemies, right? So now I'm going to go through here and see if the path that I normally take is blocked off or not. Whoop. Oh. We got a lot of poison going on up there. I'm going to have to check my poison resistance. If you ever see in a fight, this is actually a great time to talk about this. If you ever see in a fight that you're taking a lot of damage very suddenly, you'll notice that I wasn't really taking that much damage before. It's probably a specific damage type that you've accidentally dropped your resistance to by changing up your equipment. And look, you can see here I have 33% poison acid resistance. It used to be higher, if you remember. And with that many spiders shooting little darts at me, that's why I was taking so much damage there. So that's something I'm going to have to keep an eye on for the future. Now, 33% isn't such a bad percentage that, oh, I'm just doomed every time, but it is something I'm going to need to keep an eye on if I'm going through an area where there's going to be a lot of poison damage. For example, that spider there doing poison damage, I'm going to have to keep an eye on him. I'm going to want to try to fight him alone, because I know my poison resistance isn't as high as maybe it should be. So I'll want to keep an eye on that. So here he comes. I'm just about done with this guy. Okay, so he's gone, and it's just this guy and one other dude here. So that shouldn't be too bad, because I've got my sickle of consumption here. Yep, we're getting rid of everyone who's coming in for extra damage pretty quick. So we can handle this. Yeah, he's doing some decent damage to me, but he's alone, so it's manageable. There we go. Just like that. It's about controlling. This isn't really relevant this early in the game, but as the game goes on, you're going to come to find that your ability to survive is going to come down to controlling your damage intake, really. We're talking about trying to section enemies off. We're talking about preventing enemies from attacking using things like freeze or whatever. For example, a lot of people... one of the reasons why I like Alexa's Flash Freeze that a lot of, I think, fellow Grim Dawn players underestimate is the ability of this to freeze regular enemies, which really helps you control that damage output. And this is why totems are so scary, especially for hardcore players, is because there's just a whole bunch of enemies just surrounding you instantly, and it's very difficult to control that damage initially. For example, right here, I activate this, I go over here, and now I can control that damage to some extent. But if I didn't have this indoor space, I didn't have this doorway, and you can see I still wasn't able to control the damage enough, you can see how that would definitely be a problem, and that's going to be something you're going to need to keep an eye on in later and later difficulties. Now, that's a minor setback for me. Again, this is regular mode. I'm on normal. I'm not too high of a level. I'll have lost a little bit of experience there. It's really not that big of a problem, but for future reference, that is where you're going to have to try to approach a lot of these things. You're going to want to set up a plan, and at this point, I just don't have any kind of serious crowd control like Alexa's Flash Freeze, because I was focusing on the healing, which is going to carry you pretty far through. And of course, I'm doing the Iskandra's Elemental Exchange. I might pick up Alexa's Flash Freeze. I might not. I'm not sure at this point. It really depends. It probably would be a really good idea for me to pick that up for damage control purposes. But only time will tell. So we're going to go ahead and grab that. We're going to go ahead and throw this down here. We're going to put this here, and we're going to try to lure in enemies here. Okay, we have this one guy here. That's fine. Okay, he's just... My 8th resistance must be too low to resist that outright. Originally, I thought that was because both of them were hitting me with that at the same time. What is my 8th resistance? This is where we check. 8%. Yep, alright, that's why. That's why. Alright, we're just going to go ahead and rift back to my rift. Makes it a little faster. Do I have any kind of... I do not. Alright. I was checking to see if I had anything that could boost my resistance to Aether damage, which you can get these. I could actually probably make one, to be honest. Alright, at this point now, we're going to have to play the dodging game with this guy, which is going to be fairly difficult because there's not a whole lot of room to dodge that attack. There we go. We're just going to have to do this. We're going to have to do a hit-and-run kind of tactic here, which is fine. There we go. What I'm really trying to do is prevent myself from being locked. Okay, that goes through some walls. Interesting. Okay, we're getting too many of these guys. There he goes. All right. And I'm just improvising my hit-and-run strategy here because I don't have the Aether resistance at this time to deal with these guys directly. This is because these guys are actually very early. This is just one of the risks of opening a totem. Sometimes you get enemies... At least this is one of the risks of opening a totem on the first difficulty. I shouldn't technically be fighting these guys at this point. My character is not strong enough for this. At least for a direct confrontation like I was trying the first 2 times. Oop. So that's really what's going on here. Oh no, it's you guys. Alright, these are my least favorite enemies in the game because eventually they're gonna get you. Alright. This is why I tend to rely on self-heals, is because that's the only way you can survive these guys sometimes. However, I can briefly... Alright, he's going to do his ground slam. As long as I can keep this under control here. Okay, he's gone. Okay, we're getting too many people in one area, so we're going to back up here. I think I can take care of these guys really good. Yep, we got this, we got this. Alright, good. Get rid of you. I don't know if you were... There we go. And sometimes that's what you're going to have to do. This is going to be more relevant and a better example. I was kind of hoping I would be able to show this a little bit better at Warden Krieg himself, but unfortunately I got that nightmare of a spawn. But that's fine. That's not bad. It's actually probably a little better than the my right-hand ring here. Let me see. Oh, that's not bad at all. I don't do cold damage, though. The resistances are worse, but that Aether resistance, I'm going to have to take that just because I do need the Aether resistance right now. I'm going to be seeing even more Aether damage in the near future. You'll probably see it, a lot more of it next episode. Oh, that's a decent belt. Yeah, I'm going to take that. That's actually good. It doesn't give me any resistances, but that's okay. It gives me more armor. Oh, hello. Those are really good, actually. Here are these, finally. Finally, I have some good... We have this... Now, this is an interesting thing. I could very easily Alright, you know what we're going to do? Just so that you can see something a little bit different here. I'm going to go ahead and use that. Because I don't want this to be... Like, I have a general idea of where I want the build to go, but, you know, I'm going to also acknowledge that this is improv, and I've just got a really great weapon that I can really turn around and use to great effect. Why didn't I put these on? Oh, the resistances weren't good enough, that's right. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and store those. Alright, so what I'm going to do to utilize Slithbane here is I'm going to do a couple of things here. I'm going to actually pull out Sigil of Consumption. I'm going to pull this out here. Actually, that might have been a mistake to pull it back that far. We're going to pull out Iskandras really quick. Yeah, well, hold on. We're going to bring that back. Almost. Good enough. Pardon me. Now, I'm going to bring this back in here because, look, main hand damage, right? And lo and behold, increased damage. Yes, right? Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and... Actually, we're going to go ahead and put some back into Slayle's Witchfire here. This requires 147 physique. There we go. We're going to store this. Going to go ahead and bring this back. We're going to go ahead and bust out Slayle's Witchfire here. Now, I am going to rig this up. I rigged this up specifically this way for a couple of different reasons, and I'm going to show you why in a live combat scenario. Don't you worry about that. But, go ahead and store that, actually. We're going to go ahead and store my crafting materials in here. Don't worry about you not having this many. I've obviously been kicking around for this for a little while here. We're actually level 19, so we can actually, if we wanted to, make a relic. You may not have all these recipes. Don't be upset if you don't. I don't think there's any relics that I want to equip right now, actually. There's only 3 level 18 ones off the top of my head. Yeah, we're not going to bother with that right now. We're going to wait on that. That's not worth it. Alright. So, a couple of things that I want to point out before we get into a combat situation. I'm wielding a two-handed weapon. Alright, two-handed weapons slap. They do a lot of damage. I mentioned this in the first episode, but I want you to understand. Oh, wait, hold on. I actually forgot to make something for this that I really should. Now, you may be wondering, Professor, why don't you just slap, if you've played around with the blacksmith, you've probably wondered why I haven't slapped any components onto all of my pieces of equipment. I mentioned this briefly earlier, but in the earlier game, like before level 50, you really don't want to be slapping components on all of your equipment because you're going to be replacing a lot of this pretty quickly. Typically, I'll attach components, even before level 50, I'll attach components to Monster Infrequents and blue items. For example, Slithbane. Some of these you pick up, some of these you don't. And if you ever are curious about what components you can attach to a piece of equipment, this is a fun tip, and this is why I store all my components on one page. You can just hover over the item. The Slithbane is a little bit messy here because of the big text box, but you can see the flashing, which ones are flashing here. Those can all be equipped with weapons. I can do the same thing with the torso piece. I can do the same thing with the paints. You can see the flashing ones. This is how I typically check to see what's available, what I could equip on there. Now, I'm going to be putting on mutagenic ichor. Actually, wait a minute. Before I put on mutagenic ichor, there's a component that you can craft. Some components you can only craft, some components you can only pick up. But there's one vitriolic gallstone. Here it is. It is the level 20 exactly. Alright, that would increase the max level of Slithbane. I don't want to equip that. I don't like increasing the max level of equipment most of the time. I find it very inconvenient because I remember the weapon, or, well, usually it's a weapon, but I remember the piece of equipment having a specific level, and if I increase that, I keep forgetting that, and I try to transfer it to a new character maybe and use it there. It just doesn't work. So we're going to go ahead and right-click. We're going to attach this. Delightful. Now Slithbane has that, but I want you to look at the difference here. This did 30 chaos damage per attack. This is doing 123. Now you're like, wow, Professor, why aren't you using that kind of thing all the time? Short answer is because two-handed weapons rarely affect your abilities. I'm actually going to give you an example here. Sickle of Consumption. You do not see anywhere where this says main hand damage. Sickle of Consumption does not care what weapon I have equipped. My weapon isn't going to affect that damage. But the instant your Eye of Dread gets Bloodburst, a third of my main hand damage, and it actually calculates it for you here, a third of my main hand damage is transferred, is added onto Bloodburst. And this is accentuated by Focused Gaze. So that's even more damage. Even though it adds a cooldown, I find the incredible amounts of damage coming out of this is absolutely insane. And of course, Slayle's Witchfire increases your attack speed, so that gives you even more regular damage. Now you might be wondering, Professor, why would you bother putting a cooldown onto your Eye of Dread? Well, first off, boom. And then second off, while it's cooling down, I can actually hit with the weapon, which is kind of what it's intended to do as a two-handed weapon. So I'm still doing large quantities of damage in between. I'm just accessorizing my regular weapon swings with a really heavy poison explosion. And it's a very effective strategy. I can also use the poison bomb here as well. It's really weak, though. It's more for putting a target, a stationary target, into a pool of poison. It's pretty good for that. That's about it. It's not something you're going to want to constantly spam. It's something you're going to use occasionally to keep them in poison. But honestly, with Eye of Drieg being as huge as it is, I really often don't use that. But you're going to see this in a live combat scenario in a bit here. Actually, these guys aren't even going to last long enough. Behold, and while it's cooling down, I can hit this guy with my regular weapon and have a really magical time. Now, the only real change in my strats here is going to be that I no longer have the ability to self-heal thanks to Sickle of Consumption being gone. But as you can see, that's not quite as much of a problem as you would think. Because this absolutely tears through people. Very little problem here. We're going to go ahead and get rid of him at a distance because the explosion will hurt me. Yes. I'm going to be tearing through a lot of people very quickly. So basically at this point, I'm going to be relying on my ability to outdamage my enemies in order to survive. Good thing I have good fire resistance. I shouldn't have thrown that single eyeball at that single zombie. That was a waste. Could have gotten rid of these guys instantly. Does this actually open? Oh, it is. I wasted my time over there, but that's fine. So that's really why I made this change. I made this change more to show you how easy it is to switch builds a lot of the time. The more invested you are in a build, like once you hit level 90, it's hard to do. But pretty much before 90, I've never really had a problem switching my build. And even at level 90, if you have the resources, which, unless you have a fresh level 90 character, unless it's your very first character, you probably have the resources, or can get them with another character. But it's a different... You really want to approach your skills totally differently. I will eventually, once I finish increasing Cell's Witchfire, I am going to bring back Iskandra's Elemental Exchange, again because this does boost my regular auto attacks, which is what I kind of want to be using with a two-handed weapon anyways, and I'll be looking, at least for the short term, for those abilities that actually pull from my weapon damage, which, again, even Destruction doesn't, Doombolt does not, so I'm not looking for that. This is just going to be my replacement healing when I get that down the road. I'm not going to quite yet, but I will eventually. See, Bloody Pox does not pull from weapon damage, so I don't care. It does do poison damage, but I still am not going to care that much. This is just more damage for it, and this is just fragments, which is really nice, but again, optional. This does work on main hand damage, so I may wind up taking this. This, of course, does not. Not even here. I'm kind of leaning towards Caladora's Tempest to use as a kind of emergency push away, especially when I grab Wrath of Agravix. You'll see that down the road, but I am leaning towards that. I'm not leaning towards this for similar reasons. Just doesn't pull. This doesn't either, besides the fact it needs offhand, which I don't have anymore. This, of course, does not pull off of main hand damage, so I don't care. Really, I think I'm probably, at this point, temporarily, I'm going to go really heavy on the poison. I'm going to go for the Slayle's Witchfire. I'm going to go for Blood of Drieg, Eye of Drieg here. I'm going to go for Iskandra's, and I'm going to go for Caladora's Tempest. And I'll probably go for Possession as well. At least temporarily, that's going to be my pseudo build in the future. Honestly, I'll probably find something else cool that I'll be able to show off to you and give you a new build to think about and look at. So that's kind of the intention there, but I want to temporarily switch to this just to show you first off how easy it is to switch your build in the middle of a character with very little problems. And second, to show you that it's totally fine to experiment. If you don't like how your current build is going, that's fine. Maybe you didn't get a cool item that really makes it work, and you'll get that item on another character and try it again with better items. Maybe it just doesn't fit your playstyle. Who knows? But at the end of the day, I just really wanted to show off that switching is easy, and there's all kinds of cool things you can do, and kind of also show off two-handed weapons, because I really haven't done that yet. Pardon me. I really haven't done that yet, so I thought this was a good opportunity with Slithbane being really good. It is one of my favorite early game two-hand weapons, mostly because I'm an occultist addict. And I thought this was going to be a really great experience for you to see. I'll continue using this for the next couple of episodes, very likely, maybe even longer. It really depends on whether or not I find anything really worth replacing this with. But that's all for the future to decide. Like I say, I play pretty improv a lot of the time. This is fairly standard behavior for me to switch builds right in the middle. This is pretty normal for me. And if this is how you like to play, that's great. If you want to stick with one build through the whole time, that's totally fine too. Just equip accordingly. With that being said, thank you all very much for joining me. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the comment section below. And thank you all very much for joining me, and have a great 24 hours.